Hey, this is Scott with Little Kids Rock, and welcome to this daily lesson. In this case, I'm going to work on adding a guitar solo to a song. In this case, Ink is Dry. We talked about this as a group, and we're still not exactly sold on if we need a solo, but I grew up in an era of guitar solos in everything, in every single song, so I like to add them still, and, we'll see. I'll listen to the group, though. So the first step in deciding if you're going to add some sort of solo improvisation to a song is to figure out where and what. In this case, since we're writing basically a kind of poppy song, I don't want it to be like a 20-minute solo. I'm thinking maybe just going through the chorus once will work, and that's where I'm going to drop a solo in. The next spot is in the document itself. I'm going to add some tracks. In this case, I'm going to add like 4 or 5 tracks for the different kinds of solo I might do. And then I'm going to listen a ton. I'm going to put the loop feature on in Soundtrap and just keep on looping it and play and play and play. And so I think what you're going to find is, I came up with a lot of good stuff, and I'm going to put them in different tracks so that the group can listen to them all and say what they like, what they don't like. And eventually we can either take parts of each one and splice them together, or I can just re-record it, editing down the parts of it I like. But for the purpose of this, I thought it'd be kind of fun to go through a bunch of different styles, because there's a lot of guitar solos out there and there's a lot of different ways that you can work. So from real easy to real hard, let's start taking a little dive in, and we're going to start right here. So when I'm thinking about soloing this, I might start off by doing what artists have done for tons of time now, and that is literally just taking the melody itself that's happening during this chorus and playing it on the guitar instead. So in this case, you could do like this, in which case I'm just using the 3rd string. Or I could play it up an octave if I want. And use multiple strings. So there's lots of different ways. I can even do. And then what I'm going to start doing is making a little bit of variations through bending and sliding, just expression. Like maybe instead of doing, just sliding up to that last note and shaking it a little bit. For this recording, I decided I want to go a little bit more like Kurt Cobain, who did this all the time with Nirvana. I'm going to add some distortion. And to get it even dirtier, I'm going to add a little bit of flanger on this. And by a little, I mean a ton. It's okay if you don't have a flanger, you don't need one. It's just one way I like to have fun with this. So let's see what that sounds like. This time is we're going to solo over it using some kind of bluesier riffs and sounds. To do that, I'm going to use this G major pentatonic scale. It fits pretty well, but not perfectly. You're missing a couple notes. You might want like a C, particularly over some of the chord changes. But depending on how I use my expression, like adding in the bends at the right time, we're going to find it works pretty well. You'll see on the bottom there, I have an extension of that G major pentatonic. So instead of just, includes 2 more notes. And we're going to find ways to get up to those the second time through. We'll listen to it a couple of times. Like always, play through this 10 times, 15 times before you decide the parts of it you really like. So let's turn on a recording. Pretty well, but maybe now let's start thinking about how we might expand it. So for many of you guys, you know that if you just move that first scale up 12 frets, I'm going to get to a little bit of a juicier part of the neck. And so I'll take a solo here where I'm just using that. But you'll notice that the shift is the hard thing with it not seeming smooth. So let's take one solo where I'm using the bottom and the top with nothing in between and see what that sounds like. But shifting, and this is a more advanced thing, but the shifting can be a really cool way to get through the neck, and unless you have time to memorize all the notes, it's going to take a while. So for instance, look at this. That right there is the fretboard. If I was going to use all the notes, I could go on. But you have to memorize so much, and I would never ever recommend that anybody try to memorize the entire neck of the guitar. Memorize in little chunks, little positions. Get good at them, make sure that you're ready to nail them, and then you can move on. So in this case, just to get up smoothly, what I did was an activity I like to do is play with the notes just on one string as a way to get up there. So in this case, if I'm down here jamming, now I'm up on the higher part of the neck. Let's see what that sounds like if I take a solo using it. Something a little bit more like this. So that's just a sample of a lot of the blues things I can do. And you'll notice I was doing a lot of bends, and I was trying to make sure when I was bending it was going to another note of the scale, except when I got to this fun one, where I'm bending it just a half step to get that blues note. Alright, let's look at some other ways to solo. So now let's talk a little bit about nylon string. I am primarily a classical guitar player, and you're going to hear in a lot of pop songs that they'll pull in some nylon string guitar riffs for a solo, or just little, riffs here and there. And it's cool. It's different than a steel string. It's used a lot more often for soloing. So first of all, if you know your scale, I'm going to mostly still use this G major scale now, and I'm going to try to follow a little bit with the changes at times. So one thing I often hear is this concept of sixths. What does that mean? It means you're going to play a note and then a note 6 letters higher. So for instance, in my G major scale, I could do something like this. Those are all sixths apart. Not to be confused with thirds, which I'm also going to use maybe later on, where I would have notes that are 3 apart, or in this case, like a G and a B. So a lot of times when I'm practicing scales, that's what I'll do is I'll practice playing through my scale in those kind of progressions because it helps me think about how I could use them in a solo. Other things I might do, like this song has this cool part of the chord change where it's mostly in G major, but there's one part that's a little bit out, and that's where that B7 chord comes in. And where the B7 chord is, the reason it sounds funky is because it has that D sharp out of nowhere. So I'm going to try to highlight that. There's a lot of ways I can do it. For instance, it's right here, and it's going to resolve up to that E. So when I hear that chord progression, I might do something like, or, as opposed to I'll play some riffs like that with just the normal D. Or, it has a different kind of sound that D sharp really pushes. So in this case, I think what I'll do is combine it with my thirds. So you can hear that and you can hear it resolve. And a lot of these guys like to also toss in a blues lick on a nylon string because it sounds a little different. Something like, or something to that extent where you're going to hear a little bit more blues driven stuff, and it's cool having a bend on a nylon string guitar. So I'm going to let this run and let's see what I come up with. Not sure I ever said it all. try to do is we're going to add in like a shred solo because I love playing shred. I promise you nobody else that's working on this recording with me will like this solo, but whatever, I'm making it. They'll overrule me later. So here's the thing about shredding. You know, it starts off with playing a lot of notes, but you got to learn the notes. So at this point, hopefully, maybe you've worked on a bunch of your scales. In this case, I'm going to use this G scale. But I'm going to use it all up and down the neck because I've managed over the series of far too many years and a lot of practicing to learn it there. Next thing I need to do is probably add some distortion. That sounds like enough distortion. Maybe some chorus to make this sound a little thicker and some delay. Yeah, that's pretty good. That'll hide some of the mistakes I make, I'm sure. And then once I've learned all of that, then we can start thinking about what aspects to shredding I might want to include here. Now, hopefully, what I'll think about is some melodic ideas and really kind of build on them. But I'm going to pretend I'm not going to do that because that's what a lot of shredding is. It's just a plethora of notes. The good shredders are really good at phrasing and finding ways to build motives and stuff like that. So, you know, first off, the guy that taught a lot of the shredders is Joe Satriani, and he does a lot of legato passages. We've already been talking about working on our hammer-ons plus the slides, so he'll take those scales and do things like this. Where basically I'm plucking 3 or 4 times, but getting 1,000 notes out. So that's a really common thing to do. I might think of doing a little bit more like Eddie Van Halen, which started doing tapping, and everybody wanted to do that then. So what's great about that is I can once again just use the scale. So in that case, I'm literally playing notes in the scale, and just taking this hand and pushing certain ones, and he always likes to throw in some bends or homage, which is great and sounds cool. Or I could just do pull-offs to open strings, like, you know, you might find Angus Young or Kirk Hammett or something like doing. So we have this open G, I take all the notes in the scale. I'm not plucking at all, it's just this hand pulling off the open strings that makes you get a lot more notes in really quickly. Or I might start doing something a little bit more like Dave Mustaine would do, or Don Bagdero, where you're going to take a pentatonic scale and just make all these passages through that really fast. So, you know, or the blues scale, and that works pretty well. And finally, maybe something that like one of my favorite guitar players, Jason Becker, would do, which he would do sweep picking, which more or less means I'm going to find the chords and then play them as arpeggios like I would on the piano. It's just a lot harder on guitar, and you use your pick like a sweep. So the C major, for instance. Or maybe I'll switch that to E minor. So there's a lot of things you can do that, and you can follow the chord changes. So now I'm going to do what most bad shredders do, and I'm just going to try it all within like 8 bars. And let's see what happens. So that was pretty fun. Took a lot more time than I thought it would, but totally worth it because I got to play a lot of guitar and really go through and try out lots of ways to be creative. Of course, the real question is now what happens to it. I'm going to toss this back to the group. They're going to have their Soundtrap project open and be able to look and listen into the different versions and decide what they like, if they like anything at all, or if we're going to change it completely. So thanks again for checking in with us here at the Daily Lessons with Little Kids Rock.